tell you about the time that I accidentally imprisoned my wife in Ireland?
Oh, it's one of these stories. Okay, hold on. Let me get comfortable. Go ahead.
Okay, so my wife and I are in Ireland, and we're in a smallish town called Ballina, and it's got a little river running through it. And we happen to, I have no memory of what the hotel name was, but we happen to stay at either this little hotel or bed and breakfast that is literally right on the river. Like the foot of some of the building was in the river, kind of a building. Like that kind the kind of thing that you zoning-wise would not allow to be built anymore, because that 100% is going to get washed away. Anyway, the building, so in our room was literally the windows opened out, and you were kind of hanging over the river. You were like 4 feet over the river, right? And so it was this beautiful little country Irish room in Ballina, Ireland. And it had taken forever to get there, so my wife was super tired. She's like, I'm going to lie down and have a little nap. And I said, you know what? There's a Neolithic stone structure on the other side of Ballina. I'm going to walk and go see, basically it's a little mini Stonehenge. I'm going to go see this little mini Stonehenge while you take a nap. And I go, and Brad, because, how often in life do you get to tromps around Ireland looking at Neolithic stones? I was having a grand old time, and I'm like, you know what? I'm out, I'm having fun. I looked at the stones, now I'm going to go have a beer. Da-da-da-da-da. And I go and I have a beer, and I have a nice Guinness, and then you know what? I should go back and check on my wife. It's been 2 or 3 hours. Let's see how she's doing. And I go back, I get out my hotel key, I unlock the door, and my wife is irate inside. And I go, oh my God, what's the matter? Are you okay? What's happening? She goes, you locked me in. And I said, what? And she goes, when you went on your walkabout, you locked me in. I was like, how is that even possible? How could you lock a door from outside that you can't unlock from inside? And there was some weird ass old 100-year-old lock system where they had given me like a skeleton key type thing. And I thought she was going to be napping for an hour or two, and she had like a 15-minute nap. That's all it was. For like 2.5 hours, she's in there sweating bullets. Like, do I jump out into the river? Is that how I get out of this hotel room? And so, Brad, my advice to you, when in Ireland, do not accidentally lock your wife into the hotel room as you go to look at Neolithic stones. That's my advice to you.
Oh my gosh. Did she consider growing her hair really long and casting it out the window?
Oh, that's perfect. That is a perfect rejoinder for that. And on that note, I'm going to say hello, everybody, and welcome to Comic Lab, the show about Ireland and making comics.
And growing your hair and making a living from comics. I'm Brad Geiger, the author of the Webcomics Handbook on Substack and the creator of Evil Inc.
And I'm his pal Dave Keller, cartoonist of Drive and Sheldon and co-director of the documentary Stripped.
And this week's hour of comics advice is made possible by your support at patreon.com/comiclab. So Dave, let's talk comics.
Let's talk comics, my friend. So we're going to jump right into it because we have a very full show with also a lot of updates mid-show for everybody. But the first thing we want to talk about, Brad has been burning up the charts over on Substack there. And so I want to turn the mic over to Bradley J. Geiger and hear his thoughts on how things are going and how to build an audience on Substack.
This has been really interesting. I started right at the beginning of the year, actually at the end of last year. I think I started December 9th. And it has been a pleasing experience on all counts. The user interface, I think, is one of the best on any platform I've used so far. And of all of the social media newcomers, this one is actually delivering results. And as a matter of fact, we're going to talk about another one of the newcomers on the update today that is very much not. But out of all these new social media upstarts like Threads and Blue Sky and Mastodon and so forth, Substack is really working. And so having been using it now for a few months, and we've got a lot of requests to talk about this topic, I wanted to share a few thoughts on audience building specifically on Substack, because I can see a lot of the first thing you got to realize about Substack is that as a cartoonist, Substack is primarily for writers. It's primarily an author's forum.
Yeah, that was its launch, right? Was the written word. Yes.
It was very much, I think, to compete with Medium was their initial
Yes. You're right.
They wanted a better shake than what Medium was giving people. And what happened, and by the way, you remember this happening with Patreon too, all of a sudden, other people were like, oh my, I could use this. And now they've got podcasters and video, and I'm seeing more and more comics artists over there. And so we're going to talk about a few best practices and so forth. I'm not going to go over the numbers again like I did on a previous episode, but all of which to say, primarily, I use this as a replacement for MailChimp. And we're going to talk about that. It's another topic that I'm just going to thumbnail here. A lot of people are now asking, because of the monetization aspect of Substack, should they be monetizing on Substack and Patreon at the same time? It's a good question, but I want to put it in its proper location on this conversation, okay? So the first thing you got to realize is that what I did and what I kind of recommend people do is I replaced MailChimp with Substack. Okay. In other words, I approach this primarily as an email newsletter outreach platform.
Okay.
Now, as we're going to talk about shortly,
and that's so when you say I approach it, that's sort of your mental framework of how you're thinking about it.
Exactly.
Okay.
That was how I parsed mentally what I was doing. That was my approach. And for me, this became a no-brainer for me because over the entirety of 2023, I had gained 5 new subscribers through MailChimp. And that was with mentioning it, linking to it every week when I would post a new comic update, linking to it, putting prominent links on my website. All of 2023, I gained 5 subscribers.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And MailChimp was costing me somewhere around $30 a month to utilize.
As is true with me. Yeah.
So I'm like, what am I doing here? Right. Substack is offering the same thing, but they're free. And there's all of these people like Jason Chatfield indicating that this is even better. Right. So I took the jump and I moved all my MailChimp people over to Substack after I experimented with Substack for a few months.
And you just gave sort of a heads up that, hey, gang, I'm going to be moving all your emails and let me know if you don't want to be part of this list, right?
Yes.
Right.
That's very important. Ethically, it's very important to let them opt in.
Yes.
I don't think just switching them over and bringing them over, for me, for my sense of ethics, is not a great fit for me. I think you got to give them an opportunity to opt in. Right. And that means some frequent messaging, lots of instructions on how to do it, and getting that word out. And by the way, nobody opted out that I know of.
Right. Because why would they? Yeah.
Yeah. But it just felt better to let them opt in.
And one final administrative question about lists.
Yeah.
Because I think it's important to mention that because I currently am paying for MailChimp like Brad did. Yeah. And the important caveat to note, because I'm also contemplating this move that Brad is suggesting, is that when I move my list from MailChimp to Substack, I no longer technically own the list, but there's an important caveat to mention, right, Brad? In the sense that once a month, you and Jason recommend downloading the full email list in case they ever shut off access to that list, right?
But yeah, my only quibble is that I don't know that I would phrase it that you don't own the list, because indeed you do own the list. And you prove that to yourself every time you download it. You have it, you own it,
well,
you
that's
can
what I mean.
download it.
That's what I mean. In the sense that, like, hey, Google started off saying don't be evil, but eventually they started clamping down.
Right.
I'm very much of the opinion that this is early in the enshittification process for Substack. They are still in startup mode. So everything is like blue sky and free tomatoes for everybody. But then 4 years from now, it's like, hey, that tomato's $5. You know, I don't know why I'm going with tomatoes, but you know what I mean? Like, they're going to say, oh, you want to download your list? That's $400. You know, I'm just saying something like that is not outside the realm of possibility.
You do own it today. You may not own it tomorrow.
Right. So keep it down. So just put it on your calendar at the end of every month or beginning of every month. Just download it real quick. Takes 2 seconds.
It's so easy. Yeah. So you have access to those emails. And once you have given them lots of heads up, given them the opportunity to opt out, then you can start doing what I've been doing on Substack for a few months now. By the way, just an update of just what I've been doing on Substack since December 9th. In a little over a month, I had 20 subscribers, one of whom was a paying member. At the end of 8 weeks, I had 490 subscribers. By the way, 460 were MailChimp imports. Okay. But the number of supporters has grown to 6. Right? In other words, I went from paying $30 a month to earning money. And my numbers have just gone up every month. It's just been a solid growth, which has been really kind of amazing to see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, can I ask you, because this is a key thing for me, and maybe this will be helpful for other people. When you you import your list from MailChimp, you make your announcement, bada bing, bada boom. It's week 1. Did you have to, in order to set up this account, did you have to set up like bank routing information for ACH payments, or how do you get your payment? Like, I'm assuming from the get-go, Substack is like, no, you're going to be accepting payments, or can you opt out of that?
You have to opt into payments, but of course it's strongly recommended, and then it's through Stripe. And so, like, for people like you and me, and I had to kind of, that's actually a detriment to people like you and me, because, like, for me, I was already using Stripe for a certain number of things, and I had to make a second Stripe sub account. In other words, I've got one sign in with Stripe, but now I've got 2 sub accounts at Stripe.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I didn't know that was possible. Okay.
If a dummy like me can figure it out, you'll do fine. But for somebody like me who had an existing Stripe account, I had to create a sub account just for Substack.
Gotcha. But the point being, the main question that I wanted to ask was, you have to be willing to accept payments.
Yes.
And is there sort of a culture in Substack that obviously that's in the background, people could always sub to you or pay you, but if you're not necessarily pushing it, and I don't think you are, you're not necessarily driving up subscribers. I guess, what am I trying to say here? I guess for someone who's just on Substack, with every post, there's probably a sentence I'm imagining at the end of it that says, hey, don't forget to join me. And I'm guessing that for you, that kind of thing is not on there culturally.
So I've got two. This gets a little bit confusing in my case because I've got 2 Substacks.
Oh, for God's sakes. All right. Yes. Keep going.
Well, I've got a Substack for Evil Inc. and I've got a Substack for webcomics.com. And actually, both of these are in other words, I'm going to cover you on either side. You ready? Now, on Evil Inc., I set up payments because not that I was planning on doing any, they don't allow NSFW, so I wasn't going to set up any exclusive content for that just yet. But I'm like, well, I'll set it up for anybody that wants to participate in that way. Same way I'd have a support tier on my Patreon, I'll have that, right?
Okay.
And I was gobsmacked at how many people on my Evil Inc., where there's no exclusive content at all. Already, I am up to nearly 700 subscribers, 8 of whom are paid subscribers.
With nothing being offered.
Nothing being offered, no pitch, no nothing. Other than, and Substack is really good. You remember how we always say cartoonists really stink at self-promotion? Substack realizes this about, probably it's true for creators across the board. So they bake it in. If you put up a post and you hit the publish button and you don't have a button, if you don't have a little come on in your post that says, hey, share this post or consider subscribing, or it'll say, you don't have any buttons. Would you like to add buttons? And then you go, oh yeah, I forgot to put buttons. You put a button there and it just says, Evil Inc. is a reader-supported newsletter. Consider subscribing for free or for a paid subscription.
Okay.
It puts it in there because you forgot to do it because you've been doing 100 creative things and this isn't on your mind. It reminds you, puts it in there. And as a result of doing this, I got 8 people paying me for my email newsletter that I used to pay $30 a month for.
Yeah, see, that's okay. You're absolutely selling it. The one thing that I haven't done, I see all the advantages. The one thing that I personally would want to do is I would want to hire a lawyer to look at whatever the terms and conditions are for Substack, because I would want to bring Drive over, because I think that would do well at Substack. But here's my concern always with these platforms, any and every way with these platforms, is that they never claim exclusivity. They never claim that they have a right to your work. They never claim that they can control your work. But they do claim a first right of refusal or a secondary clause that they can implement if they want, which basically would limit my ability to ever sell Drive as a video game or as a TV show or as a movie or as an additional property. You know what I mean? Like, there would be no demonstrable way that it would hurt my property right now or the next 5 years, but there is an absolute way that it would hurt the property 10 years or 15 years from now, which is why I don't do Webtoons. So I would want to personally, just for Drive, for Sheldon, I wouldn't give a shit, but for Drive, I would want to make sure that they wouldn't have some ancillary claim on it 10 years down the road, 15 years down the road, you know? Yeah.
And as long as I'm thinking about this, remember I told you I had to set up 2 Stripe sub accounts?
Yep.
You are going to, most of the people listening to us are not going to have to do that. You and I are going to have to do that, because you're going to have your Sheldon Substack accepting donations. And you're going to have Drive accepting donations. And that's why I had to have 2.
Gotcha.
So, because I couldn't have them both going to the same one. So, now, I told you about Evil Inc. All of its free content. I posted one exclusive last week because I got 8 people. I'm going to give them something for their money. I'm going to give them a little something.
Listen to that guilt.
that nobody else can get. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, we'll talk about that in a little bit. So now let's go over to Webcomics Handbook, which I'm also doing on Substack. And basically what I'm doing there is mirroring the webcomics.com content. It's just going out there. Now that's all exclusive. There's hardly anything free. You get free previews. And if you see free preview that you like, you can sign up for a free 7-day trial.
Right.
So it's not paywalled with a capital P. If I've got information out there somebody wants to see, they can sign up for a free 7-day trial and look at everything, right?
Right.
So Webcomics Handbook is all exclusive, okay? And let's talk about that. As of this, the 6-month mark, I've got 267 subscribers, 24 of which are paid subscribers. And by the way, starting at 0, and there was no MailChimp import. That's all organic to Substack.
Wow. All right.
267, all exclusive content, 24 of which are paid. All organic, nothing imported. Now, that's what has me a little bit excited about what's going on Substack. Those numbers are hard to beat. Okay. So you've got all of that going on Substack, right? Plus, we haven't even talked about the sophisticated promotional aids, the ability to spread messaging through notes, restacking, and this is important. Listen to this. Recommendations. Don't sleep on recommendations. And I've said this before, the jaw-dropping analytics. The analytics on Substack are so granular, so beautiful. Everything I want out of Patreon analytics, Substack has. If Patreon could just do a Command C, Command V, I would be thrilled. That's what I want. So
that's called corporate espionage, Brad. But yes, keep going.
but in this case, I'd be supportive of it. So this is cool, Dave. Every time you make a post, and I'm going to talk about a post in a couple seconds. So I've got a whole list. Settle down at home listening.
I'm already anxious. Yeah, keep going.
So when you make a post, immediately it says, "Here's your promotional package." It sets up in 1:1, in other words, square ratio, and 9:16 ratio for like TikTok and so forth. Preset, pre-done promotional materials based on your post. Okay. So it'll have your headline, a little read in that you wrote, and the top piece of art as the background, kind of muted a little bit.
Knocked back,
And
yeah.
boom,
Okay.
Now you've got something. You don't have to think about it. You can obviously do your own, but in promoting, you download that, put it up on socials, and you've got a promotional video that you did not have to work on. Now, all of you who have been doing Substack have seen that, but have you seen this? You'll miss it if you don't. Scroll down on that, and you'll see something that's in beta, which is the ability to do a video. And listen to this, Dave. So this is really great for Webcomics Handbook. Where I've got a lot of writing, you select a paragraph, right? And then you click use this text. And then it does a video where it has an AI voice read that text with your dominant background art muted in the background. So it'll do a little read in. So like usually for webcomics.com, I'll use the first paragraph, which is an introduction, and it'll say, hey, everybody says that you should thumbnail your pages, but nobody thumbnails. Why is that? Let's talk about that. The AI voice will read it. You've got a background. You download the MP3. Boom, your promotion's done.
Okay. Can I ask you a question? Because this is something that you and I have been hoping for 15 years since Google first reached out to us about this.
Yeah.
Does it have any OCR ability in terms of being able to read the text that's in the comic itself? Or are we still... God damn it. I know this technology exists. For a little backstory, Google reached out a long time ago wanting to test out their technology on comics. And I think both Brad and I and other people gave them a bunch of files to try out. Yeah. And we've never seen anything come of it. Like as far as I know, there is. So I was just curious because surely an AI of all things should be able to look at an image, figure out what the text is, read the text, and then be able to translate the text. Because for all sorts of reasons, and in terms of marketability and also folks with site issues, how handy would that be?
Yes.
But you're saying that doesn't exist. Okay. All right.
I'm going to say not yet. I don't have any insider information on this, but when I upload an MP3 to Substack, it like I do sometimes to promote Comic Lab, the transcript ability is next level good. It knows the difference between our two voices. I can basically say speaker 1 is Brad Geiger, speaker 2 is Dave Kellett. Right. It'll have a transcript now that says Brad said this, Dave said that. Brad said this, Dave said that.
You're talking about currently Riverside that we're using to record this, right?
No, I'm talking about Substack.
Oh, okay.
I'm talking about...
A little peek
really
behind the curtain. Brad and I
stuff.
have also changed the software we use to record this podcast. And just for funsies, I'm just going to share this with everybody.
Yeah.
Riverside, the new program that we're using, has AI built in. And this is actually where I think AI is useful for artists because Brad and I spend an hour talking. We hit stop on the record. Within, what would you say, Brad, 30 seconds, a minute? It generates a full transcription of the entire show, gives us subject headings, gives us where it thinks the best selected moments of the arguments were had or conversation was. And then also does hashtags based on like the 100 keywords from the podcast. It's fucking bonkers. And it's really amazing to see. And it's actually useful. I'm like, okay, this is where it does help out artists not destroy our careers, you know?
And similar to Substack, Riverside FM it has those preset clips from the show, from the cameras that we could use for promoting, which I've already used a couple of them to promote that Father's Day show that we did. But yeah, Substack has all of that. And so, number one, I really like the preset promotional stuff that you get as a result. I find them very, very useful. Also, let's talk about this. Notes, restacking, and recommendations. So here's where everybody who first uses Substack, me included, here's where they stumble. They think Substack is one thing.
Okay.
And it's not. Substack is two things. And once you understand that, you're going to excel. Okay. Substack is two things. It's an email network outreach, and it's got its own social media called Notes. Notes is Substack's version of Twitter, and it is independent of what you're doing on your email newsletter. Okay. Two different things.
Okay.
So on your Substack newsletter, for me, for example, let's say I'm putting out Evil Inc. All right. And I'm going to do that with my vertical scroll comic because I know people are reading it in their email, which is on their phone. Right.
Okay.
So and unfortunately, you've got to do this one at a time. I want Substack to allow me to select a group of them at once and just import them in that order. But I'm sure that's coming someday. You got to go one at a time. So I post individual panels, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way down so that you can read it. I might tag a little ad in there if I want to promote my Patreon or whatever. I might even type some words and write a little something. Okay. I do all of that. And that is my Substack newsletter. That goes out to everybody on the newsletter list, everyone who's a subscriber. Okay.
All right.
And in the same way that I might change it up and reach out to free members on Patreon. You know how we've been talking about on Patreon. I've been doing like a weekly recap that's very newsletter oriented. That's mostly prose.
Okay.
Where I say, just here's the things that happened to me this week. Weren't they neat? I might do one of those on that email newsletter as well, just to keep people interested in what's going on and to be a community leader. That's what's going on in your email Substack. Now, Notes is completely independent of that. Notes is like a mini Twitter feed. So anything that you would post on Twitter, you're going to post on Notes. The 4 C's of social media is where you're going to get the biggest bang for your buck on Notes. You're going to talk about your content. You might talk some commercial. You're going to curate there, heavy on the curate. And very, very important on Substack, you're going to comment on other people's notes. You're going to be all those. I
gotta be involved.
I'm sorry. It's been true for 15 years. Social media is social.
I
right?
know. I hate it. All right.
I know. Me too.
I want a one-way conversation. But yes. But okay. So can I ask a question? So okay. So what I often do on Twitter, like let's use this as a comparison, is if it's a Sheldon comic, I'll say, hey, new comic, here's what the comic's about. And then I'll do 4 images and I'll usually link out to something else, but for which I'll get algorithmically limited. But anyway, would you on Notes for Substack put the 4 panels of the Sheldon comic or the 8 panels of the Drive comic? Or would you put 1 panel, but then point to the Substack main page?
The answer is, well, I wouldn't do it that way, but the answer is yes.
Yes, which one?
The answer is yes. I've done it both ways.
Come on, which one is it?
I've done it both ways.
Okay.
So I have posted all of the panels in a note. I don't see big traction with that. I'm not hot on that. However, and this is, again, when you understand this, you're going to accelerate. Trust me. I can promote my Substack post in Notes.
It sort of seems like it's a little... Like Notes could be used as like an RSS alert, like, hey, there's a new thing up.
That's exactly right. So if you copy your link to your post in Substack and you paste it into Notes, okay. Immediately it's going to come up with a preset thing based on your art and it'll have your headline.
Okay,
so you can say, and then you can say,
so they know what you're doing and they kind of lean into it with their own programming.
You got it right. So you say, hey, here's this comic I did today. It's a real joy. Here's what it is. And it's got the preview. They click on it. They get taken over to your Substack.
Yep.
And then they read it there.
Okay.
See, so you're promoting your Substack on Notes. That's important to remember.
And in the meantime, the note is more shareable, is more social, is more retweetable than the post is, and so that's how it becomes spreadable, viral.
All of those things that you said are true, including who sees your note. People who
does
are not,
see it. Yes.
People who are not subscribers.
Right?
Now do you understand? It's 2 things. So now I'm going to go over to Notes and I'm going to promote my post on Notes.
Gotcha. And so Brad Geiger, as a user, not as a creator, you have this Notes account and you're following Dave Kellett and you're following Gary Trudeau, right?
Yeah.
will it also suggest other things for you to see? Like, hey, we noticed you like cartooning. Here's 4 other notes from today that are cartoonists posting. Or
yep. In fact, they've got subheadings. So it'll say today in comics, and it'll have
trending,
4 things.
This subject, or
all of the stuff that you expect from social media is there.
And then can I ask you one other thing? Is it a little bit how, like in Instagram, someone posts a comic as a post, right? But then in their story, they say new comic in the posts or something, right? Yep. And they do one panel. Right? That kind of thing. Yep. Okay. So that gives me a sense of what this is. All right. Thank you.
So restacking, so you're going to go in, and I try to do, like, honest to goodness, trying to again, get the motor started on a new platform. I'm a little bit more active than I want to be, but I'll go through in the morning as I'm having my coffee. If I find something good, I'll restack it, which is like retweeting, right?
And that's in notes, or is that in posts?
That's in notes.
Okay.
Because notes is the social media one. All the posts is just your email newsletter.
Substack, this is restacking. All right.
Yes,
so when you post, do they call it a stack or a post?
Stack. I think technically it's a stack, but I've never used those.
Right.
I've never used
everybody
those
with their
phrases.
cutesy damn terms. Every platform has to have a cutesy term. All right, here we go.
Yeah, and the only one that ever had one that stuck wanted to get rid of it.
I know.
That was Elon Musk.
Gets rid of the one that was good.
Yeah.
Okay, but anyway, keep going.
So you're going through notes in the morning. You're going to comment on people's notes, and you're going to restack people's notes. You're going to do this for Machiavellian reasons, and that is because it's the social part of social media. And also, by the way, if you're a crotchety old geezer like me, you got to have your arm twisted to be nice before you had your first cup of coffee anyway. So this is just, hey, you're literally looking through and say, oh, what nice things can I say? Oh, here's this artist. Such a great artist, draws mermaids with colored pencils. Oh my gosh, her grasp of color is amazing. And so it's not hard to say, oh my golly, you're really good at what you do. Congratulations on being awesome.
It's hard for me. I don't know why that takes so much from my social battery, but I'm always like, I do not have it in me to care. But keep going.
So you're gonna comment, and you're gonna restack other people's notes. And also in Substack, you're gonna go over to your main page, and right there, you got a little menu there: home, post, podcast, subscriber stats, recommendations. You're going to go through, and everybody that maybe either follows you or subscribes or is connected to your account in one way or another is going to pop up there. You're going to recommend them. Beep, bop, boop, bop, boop. Whether you particularly, this isn't a long-term commitment. You're just recommending them. Mm-hmm. And this is a virtuous circle, because they're going to recommend you, and you're going to recommend them, and then you're going to show up on their Substack pages, and vice versa. I've gotten so much. In fact, the guy is a listener to the show. I've gotten so many followers to my Substack email newsletter from this guy that recommended me that it's unbelievable. Like dozens. And it just came through a recommendation.
Sure.
You gotta be active on the recommendations. I don't care. Yeah, I'm sure. Like when this guy recommended me, I don't think he was saying, "Oh my God, Brad Geiger, you gotta read Brad Geiger." He was just saying, "Oh, Brad Geiger, there's a nice guy. I'll hit the recommend button. That's all. That's it. Beep, bop, boop." Right? We're not talking about a commitment here. It's just a nice thing to do.
I just want to say, Brad's energy is what you should be mirroring. My energy feels like, you know how on The Simpsons, Krusty is so beat down by a career in entertainment that he's like, all right, kid, whatever it is. That's how I feel like when you're explaining what I have to do on this, because I'm like, again with a social media platform, I have to start all this nonsense. But you're right that this at least has the promise of a golden pile at the end of the rainbow, unlike a lot of them, which have generated nothing for us. So I take your meaning that within a short amount of time, a little bit of effort in the social aspect of social media on Substack has already paid off for you. And is on a good upward chart, right? Yeah.
So here's the last tip I'm going to give you before we close this out, because everything that I've said, I think you could hear on about 99 different podcasts. Now, I haven't said anything particularly earth-breaking. Here's one. Here's the extra pro tip that's going to really make you appreciate Comic Lab. I told you how you could share your notes or you could share your post in notes, right? You share your email newsletter in notes. Great, wonderful, fine. You can also do the same thing in reverse. You can take a note and post it in your Substack post. Just by clicking on that note, there's little 3 dots there that you can click. Go to the note, click the 3 dots. You'll see in the upper right-hand corner. To embed on Substack, just click copy link. To embed someplace else, hint, 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 like your blog on your website, click embed. And now you can double purpose, you can repurpose that note that you had written. Maybe it was a thought. Maybe it was like a lot of times I'll post my single panel comics in a note because they work really well there, right? And they were Patreon exclusives 2 or 3 years ago, but it's okay to share them publicly now. It's been a while. And that single panel stuff does great in social media. So I'll post it in notes to generate a little attention. Well, now that you got that note, go back and post it on your email newsletter at the bottom. I call mine part and shot, right? Here's a little part and shot. Boom, cartoon about a mermaid. You post that widget in. Not only can they see it, but then if they click it, they go over to notes. And if they're not a Substack member by then, they're encouraged, hey, I could sign up and be getting all kinds of great stuff there. And it, again, becomes a virtuous circle. Now you've got somebody who's more likely to become a Substack subscriber, right, from your website. And you've got all of that going on and on. You're going to put it in you also just somebody who's a Substack subscriber to your newsletter already clicks that note. They might not be active on Substack itself. And that's to your benefit too, to get more of that, because then eventually they will be a paid subscriber, for example, and you can work all of this towards the ultimate gain of audience building and audience monetization. All of which to say, Dave, everybody knows that you can post a Substack post on a note. Nobody talks about the fact that you can do it in reverse. You can post notes on Substack. And I've been posting those notes on my website in the blog at the bottom as a little something extra there too. And again, I've been having really good success with it.
In general, I want to tell you, your energy has been infectious and your advice has been great on this. I find myself, because I'm examining why my heart is reacting the way it is, I wish Substack had come around before Threads and Instagram, before I made my big push, because I'll tell you what it is. I feel beaten up like it's like that phrase, I'm getting too old for this shit. Like I feel like I made such a push on Instagram, like 20,000 followers, 30,000 followers, 40,000 followers, whatever the hell I ended up at, and nothing came of it. Like there was like no value to all that work to building up that audience on Instagram, that now I just feel burnt and taken advantage of. And so we'll talk about this in a minute, but I'm about to shut down most of my Instagram account. And I'm a little bit just once bitten, twice shy. Does that make sense about this whole process? Like I feel your enthusiasm and I feel that it's actually generating money rather than costing money for MailChimp. And that is super valid. It's the social media aspect. I'm just being honest with myself and the world. I'm feeling beat up about the entire 7-year cycle of every social media platform.
No, and I don't blame you a bit. Other than to say, Substack did come out before Threads and Blue Sky and all those other ones. Do you remember? It came out and we hated it.
I know, we did.
Do you remember?
Yeah.
We panned it like crazy. We were really down because I was in researching this piece that I wrote for Webcomics Handbook. I looked and it's like, oh yeah, this has been out for a long time. We absolutely despised it when it came out, but it did. To be fair to them, it did come out before Threads and all those other ones. We just hated it. Yeah. So now I know we've been really hitting this hard. I promised one last subtopic and then we're going to move on. And here, because I don't know the answer to this one as much as I think I might know the answers to the other ones. The question comes up now with the monetization of Substack. Should you be monetizing on Substack at the same time you're monetizing on Patreon? And Dave Kellett, I ask you, what are your thoughts? And just knowing what you know at this point, what are your thoughts on, do you think you'll pursue monetization there? Do you think it's a good idea? In the past, we've kind of been a little bit poo-poo on multiple monetization, right? We didn't like the idea of having a Patreon and a Patreon clone and a Ko-Fi and a buymeacoffee.com and all these other things. Do we feel different about Substack? And if so, why?
Well, as far as I understood, you said that you don't have a choice. You have to monetize on Substack.
No. You
right?
do have a choice. I said you were encouraged strongly, but you do have a choice. You can keep it turned off.
Oh, well. Oh, I thought you said you had to have it on. You just wouldn't promote it. You would choose not to promote it.
No, I said you're encouraged strongly. In other words, they say you really want this, right? But you opt into monetization.
Oh, well, that raises a really interesting question.
Well, let's just start from the beginning of the show then.
Yeah. Okay. So can I have a fixed block of copy or a button that says back me on Patreon, or is that anathema to what their setup is?
I don't know that you can. You know what? I do.
Can
know
you customize buttons, I guess, is what I'm saying on.
I know that you can customize different footers and different headers, and you can put images in there.
And can you hot link from those images?
You could absolutely. Oh yeah. So So
you could have fixed ads that say, "This is my bookstore. Here are my shirts. Come see me at San Diego Comic-Con." And that fixed ad you could run with every post.
Yep. And also, I insert live ads into live posts. Like if I'm doing a special offer this month on Patreon, I'll just include a little graphic at the bottom of that vertical scroll saying, here's what we're doing on Patreon, and then link out. Yeah,
right.
absolutely. You can. It's all HTML. It's all link. There's no limits on that sort of thing.
So here's what I will say. I will keep if I do this, I would keep my main thrust of my career aimed at Patreon, because that has to me the most robust audience. I put my effort there, my mental effort there. You know, I put my my social aspect of commenting on people's comments and all that sort of stuff. So I would keep my emphasis there. But you and I have always said, if you're going to go through the trouble of doing a social media platform, you kind of have to do it native to that platform. So you don't put half an image on a platform and then say, go read it over here. You have to do it in that platform. Yeah. And if you're going to say to someone on Substack, hey, you can go back me on Patreon, what you will find is that people will say, no, I'm on Substack. I have my credit card on Substack. So I could see an argument for turning it on, but not necessarily leaning into pushing it. Is that how you're doing it?
So I've got multiple answers.
Okay.
For the Webcomics Handbook on Substack, absolutely. That is a 100% subscription outreach. But then again, that's a very unique thing, right? That's not a comic. It's a tutorial. It's basically mirroring what I'm doing on webcomics.com. So take that and kind of put it aside. The monetization I'm doing on Evil Inc. for the Substack there for the comic is very support tier kind of. I don't want to say passive income, but it's not something that I necessarily push. It's not something that I put a lot of effort behind because I don't want to dilute my Patreon efforts, right? I want that to be prime, and I'm putting all my energy towards that. However, like I said at the top of the show, I do have subscriptions turned on, or paid subscriptions turned on for Evil Inc. A number of people have paid, not only paid, but paid like an annual membership. So like they paid for the whole year. It comes out to like $50 or something, but it's a really nice little thing that lands in your Stripe account. So the answer is I have monetization turned on for Evil Inc. at the support level. If you want to, that's great. If not, I don't push it, but I'm still putting 99% of my effort through Patreon because that's the one that has the greatest efficacy for me at this point.
Yeah. Well, in general, thank you for this update and thank you for all these guiding points on Substack. I'm continuing to mull it over because it would mean, if nothing else, just the ability to turn off MailChimp is a difference of hundreds of dollars to me a year.
Yep.
So there's that. The question becomes whether I'm in the mood to sort of start over again. And I know this is very much a Dave problem. Maybe no one else is feeling this, but I'm just like, I'm beaten down by getting excited for social media platforms. And then finding myself 5 years later going, this thing doesn't do a damn thing for me. So this feels like it has both an immediate and a long-term payback, whereas a lot of them don't. But so I'll just leave it at this. Thank you, Brad, for that update. Thank you for that in-depth guide. And I think people should listen to Brad and not to me on this one. This seems like there is a pot at the end of the rainbow on this one. Hey, if you're listening while you work, take a minute to stand and stretch.
And while you're doing that, we're going to tell you why you should join us on Patreon.
When you do, you're going to get hours and hours of podcasts that we've recorded just for backers.
And exclusive Patreon posts that go even deeper on Comic Lab topics.
And access to our exclusive Discord server, which is a thriving community of professional cartoonists.
So you can support the show you love and get tons of actionable resources for your own cartooning.
And listen, if you can't swing a pledge this month, we get it. No worries.
Yeah, listen, you can still support the show by rating us wherever you get your podcasts.
Just leave a 5-star review and a few kind words.
That, along with mentions on social media, is incredibly helpful.
Now, everybody, let's talk comics.
Oh my gosh, Dave, after filibustering for 45 minutes on Substack, I know we promised a bunch of updates. We're going to have to hold those till next episode because I want to at least do one question from a Comic Lab Patreon backer. And so let's take this one, which I think has a lot of potential for discussion. This comes in from Cosmo, who says, "Hey, Dave and Brad, love the show. I wanted to know, when you start a new story or comic, how much world building do you do before you start drawing your comics?" So, Dave, let's talk about world building.
So world building, for those not familiar with the phrase, is the idea that you are either through writing a story Bible or writing individual character backgrounds, you are essentially for yourself, eventually for the world, you are crafting the entirety or a holistic view from 3,000 feet of what this world is, right?
Yes.
And again, it will eventually be for the reader. The world building, like, for example, think of Tolkien. You know what that world is. You can feel it. You can smell it. You see it. There, he has built a world, right? Mm-hmm. But when he started, you were just with a hobbit in a hole, and that was it. And so you didn't have a sense of this bigger, wider world yet, but he might have. And I can try to think of other authors that famously wrote a lot of world building, but like Rowling did as well, wrote down a bunch of notes. Tolkien had a bunch of notes. So the question is, how much of that do you do before you start telling the actual story? Yeah. And I will tell you that there's both a trade-off and that it's subjective depending on what kind of an artist you are. So the trade-off is you can lean in too much to your world building in a way that both keeps you from starting the damn thing and also constrains your creativity as you're doing the storytelling itself. Mm-hmm. So you can have such a detailed and thorough and thought out and 400-page Bible for the story that when you actually start to go tell it, it's, first of all, it's 10 years later. And then secondly, you feel like you have to be strict to the story Bible when the moment would call for something different. The alternative is to be winging it too much. And this is just the far other extreme, by the way. There's a happy medium. The far other extreme is to be winging it too much, such that your story world facts don't line up. The dates don't line up. The kingdoms don't line up. The empires don't seem to work well with each other. Mm-hmm. Nothing seems to line up because you've just kind of been throwing spaghetti at the wall as you're doing it. To me, there is a happy medium where you skeletonize your Bible, fill out the main things that are important to you to get it started, and then sort of give yourself the grace to figure it out as you go. That's my initial answer. Brad, how about you?
Yeah, this is one of those things that I think there's no one size fits all answer, because everybody is going to have a different way that their brain approaches this. And I think for a certain type of person, that the throw the spaghetti at the wall person, that's how they thrive. They're gonna go on the fly. And by the way, I'm saying that because I'm kind of that guy.
As am I, yeah.
Yeah, where I'm like, you know, if there's a problem later on, I'll just explain it or retcon it, or here's an option, ignore it and keep going. And I'm going to write my story because Evil Inc. isn't about world building. It's about writing stories that make you laugh. It's about the comedy. Yeah. And I'll do whatever I need to do today to make that punchline land. And if it causes a continuity problem, and it has, I'll deal with it later. Because right now it's important I get that laughter from you. That's the important continuity. I give between you and me and the fence post, give two shits about continuity.
Really?
I care about making you laugh. I want that humor moment, and I'll work all that stuff out later.
So I will disagree a little bit on you. And by the way, totally subjective and totally just dependent on the type of story. I am much more interested in maintaining the continuity of drive and maintaining the continuity of, well, wait a minute, this character wouldn't say this because 40 pages ago they said that they wouldn't say their favorite ice cream is vanilla because we know they've established that they love mint chip ice cream, you know?
Yeah, and so they're lactose intolerant.
Yeah, exactly, even better. And so I'm more a stickler on that. And I think, Brad, that you are a little bit more of a stickler than you're letting on here in the sense that you would avoid a joke if it went against the core aspect of a character's being. You're not all about the joke. It's gotta work within the world you've built.
It's got to work. And I do have the world in mind, and I have written out a story Bible as it is, but a very sparsely populated one. But I know where all the parts are, all the players are. I guess what I'm trying to say is that there's a lot of different approaches to this. Mm-hmm. And based on what your drive is, if you pardon the pun, based on what your drive is as a creator, you could fall towards no world building, you could fall towards some world building, or you could fall towards a lot of world building. Right. The only thing I really want to underline is what you said at the very top of this subject. And that is that if you allow yourself to do too much world building and get caught up in that, you might never read this, or you might never write the story, right?
Yeah. The visual metaphor that I've used in the past that I really like in terms of my approach to world building and storytelling is, let's say for Drive, think of it like this. I'm starting in Los Angeles and I'm going to get to New York. And on the way there, on this road trip, I know that I need to stop in Phoenix. I know that I need to stop in Albuquerque. Mm-hmm. I know that I need to stop in Chicago. I know that I need to speed through Kansas. Dear God, it's the worst drive in all of America. And then I need to get eventually down through Pittsburgh and down to New York, right? Mm-hmm. So I've got the main stops that I need to do, but I'm not planning, to the detriment of Dave Kellett 4 years from now, I'm not planning what gas station I'm stopping in outside of Scranton. I'm just saying I know I need to get from Chicago to Pittsburgh. And so, much like my storytelling, I have the main plot points worked out, and I have the main finale worked out, and I have the main thrusts of the character backgrounds worked out. But I'm not limiting to myself to what kind of mood or tone or what they're going to be wearing 4 years from now when they enter this one scene that I haven't written yet. Because A, it's too limiting, and it's not fun for the Dave Kellett of 4 years from now. But it also, writing is adaptive, and writing, to get to, as Brad said, that punch for that day or that update, for that to work, I have to allow myself the grace of freedom. And so if I limit myself too much, I have constrained future me, or Brad will have constrained future Brad, and they won't be able to write what they need to write to make that update, that page work. Because remember what we're doing, our particular type of storytelling is not, here is my finished book. Here, read my finished book. We will eventually be able to say that. But for the time being, we're saying, hey, here is a finished page. And here are the 40 finished pages before it. Do you like the story? Great. Join us. Keep reading once a week or twice a week. And then in a couple years, you can buy a book. That's a different kind of storytelling. And so it requires each page be substantive and exciting and have a moment, right? And so I can't limit future Brad or future Dave from what they're going to need to do 3 years from now by having a super limiting story Bible. You've got to allow some freedom there.
Yeah, no, everything you said is exactly right. And also, I just want to put this in the back of your head. Sometimes I think when I see somebody who's putting what I would consider too much time into their world building, sometimes the little voice in the back of my head says there's somebody who's scared to start writing.
Yes, that's
Right?
very true.
There's
That's
somebody
very true.
who's, as long as I'm world building, I'm not writing. And if I'm not writing, I can't fuck this up. So now I'm going to go into, how our parking fees applied in the world that I'm building in this sword and sorcery, Dungeons and Dragons world. How is the mayor elected? How many political parties? When I see somebody going granular like that on world building, and I say this knowing full well that there's some people who their brains need that, and that's okay. But I also want to encourage you, if you're getting that granular in your story building, to start doing a little writing anyway, or at least to give yourself a good look in the mirror, look yourself in the eye, and ask yourself, do a gut check, or in today's language, a vibe check, and say, am I stalling here? Am I actually scared to do this thing? And that's why I'm on volume 15 of world building, because I think that's an important question to ask yourself at that point.
There is also, and it's a similar type of personality to the one that you just mentioned, they're not necessarily afraid to do the actual storytelling, but for them, the world building is the fun part.
Yeah.
And that's a problem in the sense that that's not our job right now. Our job is to tell a story that exists in that world, but is not fully exploring that world. We're not doing all the nooks and crannies of the Evil Link universe or the Drive universe. Our job is to tell a story in that universe, but is not reveling in the world building, right? It's just that's the background of it. And there are people, just like there are certain dungeon masters that they revel in all the nooks and crannies that they've created, but that's not the point of what we're doing here, The point of what we're doing here is to tell a story. And so it's for example, I also, as a way that I think is helpful, you want to give yourself just enough jumping off points so that the ballpark of what you need to write. So, for example, I wrote down in my story Bible for Drive that the royal family, the Spanish royal family that runs the empire in Drive, they operate kind of like the House of Saud. I didn't go into the details of how their actual political organizations would run, but that gave me enough wherewithal so that Dave, 6 years from now or 6 years later, knew what I meant. And when I do need to figure out, okay, how would they run a planet that's very distant from the empire? Okay, they would probably send a cousin, and the cousin would, have control over the local political operation, and right, that's how the House of Saud would do it if they were running it. And so you give yourself just enough, and also you, as a writer, you set yourself up knowing this is going to be a pitfall for 4 years from now for Dave to figure out, but he's going to have fun figuring his way. You got to dig your way out of that one, Dave. Good luck, that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, and you got to do that. You got to have the bravery to paint yourself into a into a corner. You've got to be brave enough to say, future Dave will be smart enough to do this.
Yeah, and it'll be fun for future Brad to figure this out.
Yes. You got to approach it that way. But I want to talk about current Dave right now, and this is something I've never complimented you on, but it's long overdue. And it's this: you are a very well-read person. You have a innate curiosity that I think is richer than mine at times. And not only it was scientific, but when you say, oh, well, Brad, it's run just like the House of Saud would run things. Well, speaking of, Saud, S-O-D, this dumb Saud doesn't know how the House of Saud runs things because I've never read those things. And if you want to be a better writer, just listen to how Dave talks. And this comes up all the time. Listen up. Dave is kind of a voracious reader. He's curious about things, and all of that stuff winds up making him a better writer. And if there's one lesson you can learn from all of this, it's be a little bit more like Dave. You are a very curious reader kind of person, and I really admire that about you.
Well, that's I'm genuinely taken aback by that. That's very nice of you. I didn't expect that from you. I feel like you're being sincere, so I'm actually moved a little bit. That's very nice of you.
Enjoy it while it lasts. It ain't going to happen for long, buddy. I'm going to go right back to throwing brickbats at you.
Well, let me give you my 2-cent version of why a well-read person, I think, does well as a writer. It shows you both the varieties with which humans can tell stories. And then each time you step into a story, if you think about it, you're getting to step into someone else's mind. And doesn't that make you a better writer of dialogue and of character and of background, right?
Yes.
Is when you've read a lot of books. And also just the more you know, the more you can write about. So I've always been a big fan about that. But I will say this. The difference between my wife and I is my wife is way more social than I am. Maintains literally hundreds more friendships than I maintain. And social networks, there are even more hundreds of people after that. I read way more, but here's the difference is that my stories tend to become more macro interesting. Her stories tend to become more micro interesting. Her dialogue is way better than mine. My world building, it tends to be more interesting because I understand the underlying structures of societies and past movements and political structures and all that sort of stuff. But my wife knows better how humans interact, you know? And so what I'm saying is power to different writers. Like there is many different ways to get up that mountain. And my wife's is to be incredibly social. Mine is to be incredibly well read. Brad's is to be incredibly handsome. And all three of those valid methods are totally valid, you know?
Yeah, I've been getting by on my looks for some time, but I am going to resolve to read more, Dave. I'm going to read more. As a matter of fact, Dave, I'm going to start reading right now. Just to show you how serious I am. I'm going to start reading. Right. I'm going to read this. It says here, you've been listening to Comic Lab.
Wait a minute.
The show about making comics and making a living from comics.
Your hosts have been my delightful friend, Brad Geiger, who gets me every time. He's the editor of webcomics.com and the creator of Evil Inc. over at evilcomic.com.
And my good friend Dave Kellett, the co-director of the comics documentary Stripped and the cartoonists of Sheldon at sheldoncomics.com and Drive at drivecomic.com.
And the Comic Lab theme song is used with permission from Andy Creighton at theworldrecord.net. And this episode and all episodes was edited by Matt Woodard of Woodsong Productions over at www.woodsong.media.
If you love Comic Lab, you can rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts, and you may hear your review featured on a future episode.
And Comic Lab is made possible by your support at patreon.com/comiclab. So I will go ahead and say that twice on our tread to 500 pals, patreon.com/comiclab.
You know, the day that you and I are finally going to really pull ahead in life is when they come up with something that's more close to anti-social media. Can you imagine if I could get hearts and thumbs up for just sitting in the corner and flipping everybody off?
Brad, where's the technology for me? For the modern cartoonist that likes to hang out in a dark room by themselves. Yeah. I don't want to talk to people.
As a matter of fact, speaking of anti-social media, this literally just came up in the Comic Lab Discord server. Somebody says, has anyone heard of D-Reader for comics? Now, stop just for a second, Dave. D-Reader. They put no space between D and reader. So do you know what that says?
Dreader? It's Dreader.
Can you imagine a worse name than that? Dreader. If we find anti-social media anywhere, it's going to be on Dreader.
Well, Brad, you're going to love our new anti-social media thing. It's called Hellscape. Come on and join us here at Hellscape. It's just the spelling. That's not actually how it's pronounced. It's HL and Scape, which is a really clever name. Anyway, it does look like Hellscape, but that's not the name. It's not Hellscape.
Yeah, no. And we made it real easy. You know, you've seen those tiny URLs. We've got a redirect for you. If you want to go to Hellscape, all you do is just type x.com.
Free brimstone, but it's not spelled brimstone. There you go.
Yeah, the I is a little number one.
Yeah, it's got an umlaut. Exactly.